Good morning, and welcome to the Global Energy Institute's EnergyInnovates series, where we convene a variety of experts to discuss the innovation that is driving America's energy future. I'm Marty Durbin, the president of the Global Energy Institute, and let me start by thanking the sponsor of our series, Siemens Energy. Today, we're focusing on the role of critical minerals in energy innovation. We'll hear from the Department of Energy, Congress, and the business community on how our clean energy future depends on critical minerals. As part of that discussion, we will examine the economic and geopolitical risks to which these materials are exposed, as well as policies to address end-to-end supply chain concerns to facilitate the innovation necessary to provide our future energy and emissions reduction needs. One quick agenda update: due to scheduling conflicts this morning, Representative Cuellar is unable to join us. But to get started, I'd like to welcome David Turt, Deputy Secretary at the U.S. Department of Energy. Prior to his nomination, David was Deputy Executive Director at the International Energy Agency, where he helped countries manage their clean energy transitions. And during the Obama administration, he coordinated international technology and clean energy efforts at the Department of Energy. So he brings a lot of knowledge and experience for today's discussion. David, thank you for joining us today. So let me start by asking, earlier this month, the White House released its comprehensive report on building resilient supply chains. And on the same day, DOE released its national blueprint for lithium batteries through 2030. Both reports tee up a broad set of recommendations that the federal government can take to reduce potential vulnerabilities. So can you share DOE's views on those vulnerabilities and a snapshot of what your plans are to address them?
Well, thank you, Marty, and thanks to the Chamber's Global Energy Institute for this incredibly timely and important discussion on critical minerals. Building resilient supply chains and critical minerals, including for batteries, is a top priority for this administration, for Secretary Granholm, for myself, and all of us at the Department of Energy. I should also underscore that as much critical minerals as we're using now, we will be using even more into the future. Just one data point on that: the average electric vehicle uses about 6 times the amount of critical minerals that your average internal combustion engine. And just think about all those additional EVs, all our US companies, all our companies are building into the future. So we need to not only get our act together for the reality of today, we've got to do it quickly, and we've got to prepare for the future going forward as well. And this administration certainly hit the ground running when it comes to critical minerals. To boost our economic competitiveness, to meet our climate goals, we need a robust strategy. We need action. We need urgent action. Marty, let me just give you 4 examples of the kinds of things that we've been doing so far. First, you mentioned this blueprint on battery supply chain that we put together in a very, very short amount of time, coming from the president's February executive order. So very shortly after he came in office, just underscoring the priority of this issue for this administration, for all of us. The blueprint covers every part of the supply chain for batteries, from mining to processing, from manufacturing to recycling, the full supply chain. And each and every one of those steps offers up an opportunity for us to invest and to create good paying jobs across our country. So that's point 1, a blueprint, a strategy to make sure we're taking advantage of all these opportunities going forward. Second, we've already announced over $200 million in new funding over the next 5 years for research on next generation batteries, charging infrastructure, connected and automated vehicles, all through our vehicle technology office. So that's a second effort, again, that we're already undertaking. Third, investing in research and development on critical mineral extraction here in the United States, so that we can increasingly source these critical minerals domestically in a responsible and environmentally sustainable, efficient, and cost-effective manner. We've already supported 13 critical mineral projects in coal and power plant communities across the country, creating jobs, boosting local economies. And then fourth, and hopefully we'll get a chance to get into this a little bit later, we've had substantial financing options through our loan program office for battery supply chain support in particular. And all of these efforts and all the other efforts that we're doing will require an engagement with the private sector. We've already done that, Secretary Granholm, myself. We look forward to further conversations with the Chamber, further conversations with particular companies. And this is an area we're going to only be successful if we have the government, private sector, all of us working together. And finally, Marty, I just want to emphasize that as much as we're doing already in this administration, and it's an awful lot, there's much more that we could be doing, should be doing, and the President's American Jobs Plan that's pending in Congress right now would give us a huge range of additional tools and resources to be successful here. So just to give you an example of a couple things that have been proposed by the President there. More than $300 billion to retool American manufacturing and small businesses. $52 billion for existing access to capital programs to modernize our supply chains for batteries, for electric vehicles, other clean energy technology. And very much in line with the President's proposal, the President's American Jobs Plan, we're seeing efforts in this bipartisan infrastructure conversation for a particular specific grant program for battery material processing, manufacturing, and recycling. So this is a historic window of opportunity. We're doing everything we can from the administration side of things, using the existing tools, existing resources, existing levers that we have. And it's a historic window of opportunity on Capitol Hill. And hopefully all of the folks in our virtual audience here are engaging with their members of Congress so that we can take advantage of this historic opportunity.
Great. Well, thank you for that. It's a very helpful context. And let me say that we too want to take advantage of the opportunity we have. Appreciate the outreach we've already had, from your agency, and we're fully engaged with Congress as well. It will take all of us to make this work. So let me ask you now. DOE's got a long history of working to address energy security issues, and in fact, it's kind of a central focus of the agency's mission statement. So earlier this week, GEI released an analysis asking whether lithium in particular could become the petroleum of the 21st century. As I'm sure you know, the IEA has warned that we could fall well short of what's needed to support accelerated deployment of certain technologies that are going to be necessary. So regardless of the answer to that admittedly provocative question, what do you believe we can learn from the decades of work that DOE has, that DOE is engaged in to reduce petroleum-related security issues that can be applied to this potential clean energy dependence concerns?
Well, I think it's a terrific question, Marty, and we should always be looking at what's worked in the past and what's not worked in the past so that we can make sure that we're informing how we go forward. And I think there's a lot of lessons in the past on the oil security side and other security efforts, energy security efforts that the department has been working on in the past that are useful in this particular context when it comes to lithium, or more broadly when it comes to critical minerals. I think first and foremost, and this should be important for all decision making that government does, the private sector does as well, is we have to understand where the playing field is right now, what's actually going on right now, not only in the US, but throughout the world, and what's going to happen in the future. We've got smart people, we've got experts, we've got 17 national labs. We do a lot of analysis about where we're at and where we're going. And just as it was absolutely critical, is absolutely critical when you're talking about oil security, absolutely essential for critical minerals as well. So just a few data points of what we know where we're at right now. Right now, China has over 75% of global battery cell fabrication capacity. The US has less than 10%, 75% for China, 10% for the US right now. China is the only country in the world with control over every tier of the supply chain for critical minerals, including lithium. China has 80% of raw material refining capacity. The US has virtually none. So that's where the playing field is right now. That's what we're dealing with. And that's why we're feeling such an urgency from the US side. Including and especially on the security. We need to be thinking about this in national security, economic competitiveness, economic security ways. The second lesson learned that I take away from looking at the past is we've got to get our own domestic house in order. And we talked about that in your first question, Marty. We've got to do a lot of things. We've got to do them urgently, hopefully with congressional support and new levers, new resources, new funding, all the way from mining to recycling and everything in between that spectrum. So we got to get our own domestic house in order. It's critical for all of our security challenges to do what we can domestically. And then third, just like what we did with oil security, we need to work with our key allies. Just as we did coming out of the oil embargo when the International Energy Agency, and Marty, as you mentioned, I was previously working at the IEA, including as the deputy there, we created the IEA. We created an international institution so that key countries around the world could work better on the oil security issue. And we've seen time and time again real world benefits coming from those kinds of international collaborations. And we need to do the same thing on the critical mineral side with our key allies. Just pointing to the IEA is evolving its sense with U.S. leadership, with Australian leadership, Japanese leadership, Canadian leadership, European leadership to take on the critical minerals issue. So Secretary Granholm is going to be chairing the ministerial for the IEA that'll take place in early 2022. And one of the issues up for the agenda, one of the big issues up for the agenda, one issue that we're really pushing is to take a look at critical minerals, to take a look at this international collaboration to make sure that we've got a diverse supply of supply chains for critical minerals. So those are some lessons certainly taking from the past, and I think very applicable in this situation, Marty.
Great. Well, thank you for that. Now, a few weeks ago, we had a great conversation with your colleague, Kelly Speaks-Backman, on the work that the Energy Efficiency Renewable Energy Office is undertaking on this issue. Of course, there are a lot of other programs within the DOE are also involved. You mentioned the Loan Programs Office, and in particular, they're seeking applicants to pursue potentially more than $20 billion worth of projects related to the critical materials supply chain and manufacturing of batteries for electric vehicles. So can I ask you to tell us a little more about that effort and the kind of response you're seeing from the private sector and what that can mean over the next several years?
Yeah, happy to do it, Marty. And I think the main point to emphasize when it comes to our Loan Program Office is we're open for business. We've hired a phenomenal talent in Jigar Shah. Many of folks in our virtual audience may know him, including from his podcast days. He's coming in, he's taken a new look, making sure that we're open for business and doing whatever we can to help on the critical minerals supply chain front and everything else. The Loan Program Office, for those who don't know the history of it, in the Obama administration, this was the office that funded some of the America's bravest entrepreneurs to get their best ideas off the ground and really stimulate whole parts and sectors of our economy. So when PV developers needed to supply the growing demand for renewable energy, it was a loan program that allowed the first 5 utility scale facilities of the nation to get up and running, to kickstart the fastest growing sector of the solar industry. When a then small company called Tesla wanted to manufacture the first zero emission, zero gas, full size electric vehicles, the Loan Program Office gave them an absolutely critical loan at a critical point in time to get them to production scale. So we're building off this record. We're taking the lessons learned. We're using the $20 billion, as you mentioned, Marty, and loan authority that can be used to finance commercial projects in the battery space. And we're particularly excited about that. And we need companies to reach out to us. We're actively reaching out to companies, but we want to have that kind of partnership. A few legislative changes that Congress made in December have actually made it easier for project developers to take advantage of the loan program funding. So what we're seeing is a renewed interest in the loan program. Let me just give you a couple data points on that. In 2020, all of 2020, we only saw 3 applications come in for loans in the loan program. Only 3 throughout all the areas that we can provide loans through the loan program. In May of this year, we're averaging 3 applications per week. So we've gone from 3 loan applications for a whole year to 3 applications per week. That's what Jigar Shah and the team has been able to do in an incredibly exciting way. So keep it coming. We want to get this capital into the market. We want to stimulate these new industries, these new jobs, these new entrepreneurs out there. And again, the American Jobs Plan would supercharge our ability to do this kind of thing. The resources, the authorities, the flexibilities to create millions of jobs, these supply chains, and tackling the shared climate crisis that we've got. So again, with the American Jobs Plan, these next few weeks on Capitol Hill will be absolutely critical. I know we've got Congressman Stauber here and leadership from the congressional side. We look forward to working in partnership, not only with Congress, but as I said before, Marty, with the chamber, with companies. How can we take advantage of this historic opportunity in front of us?
Great. Well, David, as you said in your opening, we're at a critical and pivotal point on this issue, and I think the participation we've had with the audience today, lots of questions we did get, which you addressed many of them. There's obviously a lot more to come, but we really appreciate you taking the time to spend with us today, and I personally, look forward to working directly with you to help us move this issue forward. So, thank you very much for being here.
Thanks, Marty. It's terrific to be with you, and looking forward to working in partnership with you in the chamber.
Great.
Next, we turn to Congressman Pete Stauber, who represents Minnesota's 8th Congressional District, covering northeastern Minnesota. Welcome this morning, Congressman Stauber. Now, you represent the Iron Range, historically one of the most prolific mining regions in the world. How difficult is it for companies in your district to get new mining permits for the minerals our economy relies on? And more importantly, how would your Accessing America's Critical Minerals Act help? I think you're muted.
Okay, sorry about that. It's extremely timely. We have, for those of you who don't know, I represent northeastern Minnesota, and we not only mine the iron ore that makes 80% of this nation's steel, and we've been doing it for 135 years. So mining is our past, our present, and our future. And we have what we call the Duluth Complex in northeastern Minnesota. It's the largest copper nickel find in North America. And we have the ability to help, as David was talking about, the supply chain dependency. We in northern Minnesota can help our nation with the supply chain dependency concerns that we have. My bill talking about accessing America's critical minerals is really simple. Let's use some common sense measures. Let's put a timeline on the development. Make sure that we just can't, those that are opposed to projects just can't weaponize the court system, weaponize the transparency of the entire process. And we can do better than what we're doing right now. And I'll give you an example. That Duluth Complex, the largest copper nickel find in North America, we have one company that's been permitting for 19 years. We have a second company has been permitting for 10 years. There's 3 and 4 companies. This complex is so rich that we have 3 or 4 companies in line to mine these critical minerals that are going to be important strategically for our national security, and as we transform into electric vehicles and other sources of alternative energies. And we have the ability to bring this to fruition if we can allow the government and stop weaponizing the courts. And I know that our skilled miners and the members in our labor community are ready, able, and willing to do that. We just have to have the ability to do that. And I will remind people that, David had mentioned that, we need to study these critical minerals and what have you. We know we're transitioning into off of our fossil fuels and into electric vehicles and such, as I stated. So we have the ability. We've mapped these already. We've mined we've drilled holes in the Duluth Complex that found just an enormous amount of copper and nickel. More than every exploratory hole that we drill, there's more copper and nickel there. We do it the best. Under the best environmental standards and the best labor standards. And one of the things that we need to do is allow the process to happen, allow the EIS to go forward in a timely manner. And that's the American Critical Minerals Act that I put forward, and it's getting some support in Congress. And I hope that people recognize if we haven't learned anything from COVID, then shame on us as Americans. What we've learned is a supply chain dependency, not only on critical minerals, but pharmaceuticals and PPEs and others. So I'm really excited for, excuse me, I'm really excited for Minnesota's 8th Congressional District to be able to have a really impact in this critical minerals conversation. And I'm looking forward to really pushing our administration into saying we can do it. We do it better than anybody in the world. And Minnesota's miners and our communities on the Iron Range are ready to do so, and really excited about it.
Now, you hit on a great point. In the Chamber's comments to DoD and its request for information on critical minerals portion of President Biden's supply chain executive order, we argued that the critical minerals list is not comprehensive and the administration really needs to expand it. And we suggested they move it to a new universe called strategic minerals, which would include commodities like copper and nickel, which you mentioned, which are increasingly important to our economy. Now, what does the massive projected growth in strategic mineral demand mean for a region like yours? I mean, you already mentioned the Duluth Complex, but as we see the demand, and we'll talk about this with Roger later, the demand for these commodities to produce, whether it be batteries for electric vehicles or whether it's for wind and gas turbines, what does that mean in your region?
Well, Christopher, it means a huge opportunity for us. The Duluth Complex contains 95% of our nation's nickel, 88% of its cobalt, and more than 1/3 of its copper and other platinum metals that we use every single day. And what it means is we have to have an administration that just doesn't give lip service to domestic production of critical minerals. And I'll give you an example. In October of 2020, then candidate Joe Biden stated that the critical minerals for electric vehicles will be sourced domestically. We were excited in Minnesota to have that opportunity to provide these critical minerals. And then just this past May of 2021, the Biden administration says, no, we're not going to source these minerals within the United States. We're going to purchase from foreign nations. That's unacceptable to me. We should not hold the dependency of our own our own destiny in the palm of any other nation. COVID has taught us that. And I am adamant that the Biden administration reverse that decision and allow the critical minerals for electric vehicles and others to be domestically sourced. We need to domestically source these. We are blessed with rich minerals in this country. We do it better than anybody. And so we have the ability to, as I said, just one company, Polymet, they're in their 19th year of permitting, and that's unacceptable, 19 years. But in any event, in 2011, the University of Minnesota Duluth Labovitz School spoke about the economic impact on northern Minnesota. It would be $515 million of economic activity every year for decades. That's like bringing the Super Bowl to northeastern Minnesota every single year. That's the economic impact for our region. And by the way, every school district in the state of Minnesota, for example, receives mineral royalties, and it helps every school district in Minnesota. So I'm pushing not only this administration, but others into don't just give us lip service and we need these critical minerals. Let's do it here. Let's do it now. We can't plan out a certain dependency when we have to rely on foreign nations. Because if they say, no, we're not selling to these critical minerals to the United States, we're in deep trouble. And this is going to help with our supply chain dependency. It is a win-win-win if this administration allows us to go forward following the process and employ our men and women in the mining community and others to extract these minerals in a safe, responsible, and an environmentally friendly way.
Congressman, you're such a passionate advocate, not only for your district, but for critical mineral mining writ large. Are you seeing any movement as you try to convince your colleagues in Congress that we need increased domestic mining of strategic minerals, and it's crucial for the energy platforms of tomorrow? But as you've pointed out, is being and will be conducted in the U.S. under the tightest environmental regulations in the world.
Well, I think that I am slowly but surely we're trying to work across the aisle and with this administration to understand that we have the ability to help this nation secure its dependency. And it's not easy. When certain groups weaponize the system, for example, Polymet in their 19th year have been to court several times, almost $400 million in the permitting process alone. And Twin Metals is following that. And what we need to do is really shorten that process and not eliminate any environmental standards, but eliminate the duplication of some of the legislative items that need to be done in following and properly following the EIS. So my job is to continue to educate my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, but there's a certain certain people rather, that are just adamant to mining, the keep it in the ground mentality. Let's source it from foreign lands that, by the way, don't do it as green as we do, don't do it with the labor standards or the environmental standards. We can't hold a blind eye. We can't have a blind eye to that. We have to make sure that we put forth the human rights standards that this country is known for. And I'm talking about child labor. Let's talk about cobalt real quick. Cobalt, the Congo sells more cobalt to the United States, and they use child labor. 30 to 40,000 children are used to forcibly mine minerals. This country, the United States, should never buy 1 ounce of minerals that are mined by child labor, and that's what I'm trying to allow our legislation and my colleagues along the other side of the aisle to understand. And it's an uphill battle because, as I said, some powerful key people are just not going to do it. I mean, our Secretary of Interior, I talked to her yesterday in the Natural Resources hearing, Secretary Helen, and I said that, and I said to Secretary Helen, I said, the Duluth Complex can help with our mineral dependency, and will you commit not to, put forth your ideas or suggestions, or put forth your independent view of the project before the EIS is completed? Allow the EIS to be completed. She couldn't answer that question. And so I would like to talk to David from the director, Deputy Director of the Department of Energy. Why is that? Why is the Secretary of Interior, why can't she answer that question? Why can't she answer the question, would you rather have these minerals sourced in the United States and in my district in Minnesota under the best labor standards and the best environmental standards, doing it the greenest and not use any child labor? Why can't the Secretary of Interior say, yeah, I agree with you, Pete? So there's a big educational piece that I'm pushing, and I refuse to have this country take a back seat to any other foreign nations that don't have our best interests at heart. We have the ability to do it here, to do it right, and I'm looking forward to that. That is a fight that I will stand with the workers, the union workers in northeastern Minnesota. I have a champion in me, and they know that. And not only in critical minerals, but also iron ore mining in Minnesota is. I'm a champion of that. Will continue to be a champion of that, because in Minnesota, mining has been our past, our present, and our future, as I stated earlier in our conversation.
Well, Congressman Stauber, we've seen several bipartisan efforts, including the Energy Act of 2020 that included some coverage here. Chairman Manchin's bill, which is being debated right now as part of the broader infrastructure compromise that Secretary Turk referenced, includes some coverage here. Perhaps baby steps, but with an advocate like you, I'm confident that we'll see this issue continue to grow and hopefully progress in the future. So we thank you very much for joining us today, and good luck in your efforts in pushing this issue forward.
Thank you, Christopher. It's great to join the chamber, and have a great day, everyone, and take care of your families. Thank you.
And now I'm very pleased to be joined by Roger Martella, the Chief Sustainability Officer for General Electric. Now, Roger is no stranger to many in our audience, having served as the General Counsel at the Environmental Protection Agency and at DOJ's Environment and Natural Resources Division before joining GE, where he was recently appointed as GE's first Chief Sustainability Officer. Good morning and welcome, Roger.
Chris, thanks for inviting me. It's great to see you. I'm honored to be part of this discussion.
Now, I'm very excited to have you and a company like GE as part of this discussion, because I think it's the most important thing that we can do as advocates for increased or a more robust supply chain is to help people understand where these minerals are used. Now, GE is a giant manufacturer of energy platforms around the world. Can you share just a little bit of a flavor for what products and systems you produce as an intro into this conversation?
Happy to, and thanks for asking. And as you can see from the little logo behind my head, it pretty much says it all. You know, our mission is to build, to rise to the challenge of building a world that works for tomorrow. And when we think of that, we think of really three fundamental challenges that we think the world is confronting: the energy transition and climate change, the future of flight, and the delivery of precision healthcare. And so there's this very strong alignment between our business missions, our three business missions, and the sustainability missions, the sustainability challenges that the world's confronting. And we're, I think, relatively unique in the United States as well. We're a global company, but we're relatively unique as a manufacturer in the United States, as a company that's actually building all these technologies in the US, thanks to our 56,000 employees here in the US. On the energy transition side, we're manufacturers of the leading onshore wind turbines in the United States. We're the manufacturers of the largest offshore wind turbines that have been built and realizing great success both in the European Union and in the United States. We build the world's most efficient gas turbines in addition to onshore and offshore wind. We have a full suite of grid technology, both digital and physical grid, as well as nuclear energy. So 1/3 of the world's energy relies on GE's equipment to be generated and transmitted. In terms of the future of flight, we're using advanced technologies such as additive manufacturing, composite matrix ceramics to ever increase the efficiency of our jet engines and make the aviation sector more efficient. And with Precision Health, we're looking to deliver innovation to deliver the best quality information everywhere and in more portable ways, and also investing in breakthrough technologies such as hydrogen, carbon capture, small modular reactors. We just announced last week open technology for open rotor aircraft engines that can reduce emissions by more than 20%, especially with sustainable aviation fuels, and artificial intelligence in the healthcare space. So, a lot of technology manufactured in the United States and globally to address these three fundamental challenges for the planet.
And you mentioned some of the manufacturing that GE is a leader in. One of the largest turbine manufacturers in the world, not just the giant wind 3 and 5 megawatt wind turbines, but also gas turbines. How important is a reliable and sustainable critical mineral supply chain to your operations?
You're right. The technology is getting bigger. Our offshore wind turbine, the Haliade X, the largest in the world built, is 12, 13 megawatt turbine. So you can see how the technology is getting bigger, and that's because of, to some extent, the use of minerals, whether those are turbines, gas turbines, healthcare equipment, jet engines, and things like that. And you mentioned sustainability and reliability, and I'm really glad you used both of those words, because to us, those are woven together. Sustainability of our supply chain and the reliability of our supply chain have to go like hand in glove. There's no doubt about it. Our products rely on the minerals that the Deputy Secretary and the Congressman were talking about. Those include the rare earth minerals, the essential minerals, and the conflict minerals. All categories of them are essential to our products, and they're essential to solving these three global challenges. We don't purchase these minerals directly. We're not directly dealing with a refiner or a smelter or a supplier. We're 4 or 5 steps away from that in the supply chain, but we have to have reliable access to these minerals. We have to make sure that our access to them is sustainable. Reliability and sustainability, I'm not going to say which, they're equally important, and they go together, and I can talk more about how we work to assure some of the rule of law, human rights issues that the Congressman was talking about from a sustainability perspective, child labor, things like that. But beyond the reliability and the sustainability of our minerals, we also want to focus on innovation too, finding ways to either be more efficient with the use of minerals or even looking for new breakthrough technologies that allow us to substitute new types of technologies like superconducting in place of rare earth minerals and some of our turbines and things like that we can chat about.
So I appreciate your point that you're an end user of critical strategic minerals after they've been processed and turned into end user products, things like magnets, which all turbines rely on. As you sit here today, what is GE's outlook for future growth of turbine demand, both on the wind and the gas side?
Well, GE obviously we support the Paris Agreement. We support President Biden's ambitious climate change goals for more than 50% reduction by 2030 of greenhouse gases. And as a company that provides 1/3 of the world energy, we know that 50% is an average, which means some sectors are going to do better and some sectors are going to do worse. And our expectation is that the energy sector, where we're engaged, is going to over deliver on that 50%, and we're going to have deeper decarbonization than the goal. So obviously, the most essential part of that is the rapid acceleration of renewable energy. The IEA projects that there will be 2.4 times the amount of wind energy in the United States 10 years from now than there is today. I would probably think it's going to be significantly higher than that. And so obviously, the supply chain for both offshore wind turbines, which are newer in the United States, we're just getting started on that, but also continuing to grow onshore wind turbines and repowering existing onshore wind turbine farms is key to this growth. I would also, make the point that this doesn't always get as much attention these days, but gas is also key to addressing the energy transition, the right role for gas of reducing emissions compared to other fuels, and also creating baseload energy to expand, become a force multiplier for renewable energy is critical. And that's not only true for the United States, but I think increasingly for other parts of the world, we see huge opportunities to decarbonize in other places of the world by deploying gas and then building a renewable infrastructure on top of that. So these are the opportunities we see to be able to meet the goals. We're very optimistic. If we look at the president's ambitious goals, the other goals of the Paris Agreement, that we will over deliver with the energy sector. We could do significantly better than that 50% if we deploy these technologies, both a combination of renewables, gas turbines, and making sure we're making the grid resilient at the same time with grid infrastructure and grid modernization, that we can over deliver on that 50%.
I'm glad you mentioned gas as part of that, not only as the backbone of a clean energy economy, backstopping wind and solar, but also the very real potential of hydrogen as a storage source or a clean source of generation. Now, you mentioned tremendous demand growth, especially on the wind side, especially as we move into more advanced offshore platforms. How is GE positioning itself to meet those demands as it relates to sourcing the critical mineral inputs, and especially as you noted before, looking at rule of law and some of the human rights questions that Congressman Stauber brought up?
Chris, I'd say there's three things, because as I agree with what the Deputy Secretary said, this is a critical moment to have this conversation and really commend the Chamber for highlighting this issue. I want to start with sustainability, because we have to start there if we're going to talk about these minerals. Human rights has to be first and foremost in our thinking on this. We can't afford to get access to minerals if we're not doing it in a way that isn't respectful of the rule of law, that isn't respectful of human rights and the other topics we've been talking about. So we start with a culture of integrity. We start with knowing that we're not the ones purchasing the minerals, but they're in our technology that's critical to addressing these issues. Having very firm policies, principles, audits, and transparency of our suppliers. We have our own responsible mineral sourcing principles that outline our commitment to respecting human rights through responsible sourcing practices when it comes to sourcing these minerals. We're working to eliminate from our products all conflict minerals that the Congressman talked about from Congo and other high-risk areas. And every year we undertake a very reasonable due diligence to determine if any of our products contain these conflict minerals or other minerals that we need to be addressing from the areas that might raise human rights considerations. So this is the top tier concern. We're very transparent. We report on all these metrics, and we look to our suppliers in a very close relationship to trace things all the way back to the source. So number one issue is sustainability. We can't approach the minerals unless we're doing it in a way that respects human rights and the other issues we've talked about. Supply chain, is a top tier concern, as we've heard from our other speakers today, that these issues are not getting easier. Supply chain, frankly, is a top tier concern for the company. It's a risk issue. It's not just a GE issue. I think most manufacturing companies would say supply chain right now is something that we want to be managing very affirmatively. We, being a global company, we rely on a very diverse global network of suppliers for our essential minerals. We can trace back to over 300 smelters that contribute to our supply chain. So we're not putting all our eggs in one basket, but trying to keep a very diversified supply chain to address that concern. And then the third part of this, as I mentioned before, is we always want to be innovating. If we're using a certain amount of minerals today, we want to be thinking about how can we be rethinking technology, advanced materials to become less reliant on any one part of the world, any one type of material, any kind of geopolitical risk. I gave an example earlier where we're looking at our wind turbines and saying maybe we can fundamentally reapproach the technology using superconductor technology, and that would enable us to have less reliance or no reliance on some of these essential minerals. So that would enable us to achieve these great goals, but also be addressing these other considerations at the same time.
I especially appreciate, given that this is an energy innovation series, the point that you ended on. And GE has always been one of the great innovators in this country, going back to its original founding, and being able to find ways to use less, to use it more efficiently, and potentially recycle it as well. But I think we've run up to the end of our time, but I'm very thankful, Roger, for you joining us today. And you have a big job ahead of you as the first Chief Sustainability Officer, and wish you the best of luck.
Thank you. We'll appreciate the partnership.
Hi, I'm Dan Byers with the Global Energy Institute. And for our last segment this morning, we're delighted to have with us Simon Moores, Managing Director of Benchmark Mineral Intelligence, a firm that provides market price and analytics related to lithium, graphite, cobalt, nickel, the foundation of lithium-ion batteries. Simon is really one of the world's foremost experts and respected voices when it comes to understanding the lithium-ion battery supply chain. So we're delighted to have you joining us from London today, Simon.
Hey, Dan, thanks a lot for having Benchmark and myself on this session. It's good to be here.
Great. Well, we've heard a lot from the other panelists about R&D, loan guarantees, financing, the mining and permitting issues as well. I think maybe if you could just sort of fill in a little bit on everything you see from Benchmark's global perspective in terms of supply chain vulnerabilities, and maybe in particular talk a little bit about the battery manufacturing side, so the downstream impacts, which are also very important here in the U.S.
Yeah, sure. So at Benchmark, we track this data from the mine, the lithium mine, for example, all the way through to the lithium-ion battery cell. We do this on a monthly and quarterly basis. And the one thing I love looking at is the battery data. What is being built? What capacity is in the pipeline over the next 10 years? How many of these gigafactories or battery megafactories are being built? It's something we started collecting in 2015 when there were only 3. And now, at present, we're at 215 of these mega factories in the pipeline to 2030, of which 159 are in China. The good news is there are 14 now either active, 5 active, and another 9 in the pipeline within the USA. So the US, the wheels are starting to turning on building lithium-ion battery capacity domestically. Of course, Europe has been a big proponent on building their own battery capacity from scratch. It didn't exist before at scale for electric vehicles, and now Europe are at 22 of these gigafactories. And the key thing for me is the rate of build and planning of these supersized battery plants is increasing now. Ever since the last 18 months, Europe went into overdrive. Really, the USA in the last 3 months has now gone into not quite overdrive, but certainly there are positive signs that far more battery plants are coming now, and that comes from the top. It comes from the administration. So 215 of these plants at a gigawatt capacity of 3,800. So the reality is that's not enough electric vehicle capacity. It's nowhere near enough for energy storage. So far more of these plants are yet to come. And this is why we call it a benchmark, this global battery arms race. It's not just necessarily a race of the USA versus China. That is an issue. But actually, it's a race against a technology shift, a shift from analog, if you like, in gasoline vehicles through to digital for lithium-ion powered electric vehicles. And so that's key for me. Is number one thing is every country, every continent in the world will need their own lithium-ion battery cell capacity as a central cog in this supply chain. Now, a battery plant without raw materials is as useful as a grain silo. I apologize to anyone that is from the, let's say, the agriculture industry. Grain silos are useful, as someone did point out to me. But for the electric vehicle industry, you can understand my analogy. And so the key thing here is there are the upstream that needs to be built alongside the lithium-ion battery capacity, and of course the downstream. A lot of the auto industry are planning electric vehicles. They're being built, they're being announced. It's been a bit of a headline race with some reality, some marketing in that. But the key thing for me is it takes 4 to 7 years to build a lithium mine and 24 months to build a battery plant. So long-term planning is needed to ensure there's enough raw materials available, the key ones being lithium, cobalt, graphite, nickel, manganese, available to go into these batteries. And so for me, the one key message I want to get across for the upstream and the critical minerals are, it's not just mining here, it's chemical processing, it's specialty chemical processing. The central cog in the supply chain where the lithium hydroxide, lithium carbonate, manganese sulfate, all the chemicals that actually are used in the cathodes and anodes that actually go into the batteries. That's key. That refining capacity is also a phrase that's used. If you look at the way China's driven this industry forward in the last 15 years, China doesn't mine all of these raw materials itself. Only 23% of the basket of battery raw materials are mined domestically within China, but 80% of these chemicals are refined in China. So you can see the strategy. Mining's going to be key, but the absolute key is build the midstream, because then the industry, this lithium-ion economy, as we talk about, starts to build out. And that's something that the US, being a little bit behind where Europe is and sort of a lot further behind where China is, the US has a bit of an advantage now, in a sense that all of these plants being planned, all these electric vehicles can actually now be planned in tandem with new mines. The problem is, at the moment, for investment money, investing into a mine is a much harder sell than investing into even a battery plant. And so there's a capital markets issue that the industry has to overcome. I think the final kind of points I just want to make before we kind of open up the conversation is every country in the world, every major economy in the world will need a lithium-ion economy. It's a technology that's here to stay. It's getting better. That does include solid-state batteries. And then if you decide you're going down the route to build this lithium-ion economy and make these new industries, a mine to battery cell strategy is needed. It's how much lithium you're going to need, plan the mines, plan the output alongside the battery capacity, and then the whole industry begins to build. The good news is, with the US stepping up, you now have the world's 3 major economic regions, the USA, the European Union, and China, all putting lithium-ion batteries at the top of their geopolitical agenda. That means they're mainstream, they're here to stay, and I think it's going to be an interesting rest of the year as a result. Thanks, Dan.
Wonderful. That's very helpful context and an important point on the strategy needing to really be mine to sell. Maybe just a quick follow up on that, and then we'll see if we can get to an audience question or two. But you talked about Europe's work on the battery manufacturing facility side. Are there certain policies there that are helping to incentivize that the U.S. might even look to model from? And then I guess I'm also interested in, you talk about the importance of building the midstream. You can have the mining side and the manufacturing side, but the midstream is also very important. Where is Europe on that, and are the policy approaches to sort of incentivizing activity there any different than they might be for manufacturing?
Yeah, I think the European Union has had great success in building what they called this battery alliance. Now, I think the key thing for me is spending a lot of time in Washington, D.C. with various departments, and when we work and benchmark with other countries, it's quite interesting seeing how government works, or trying to understand at least how government and government departments work. With the European Union, they built this battery alliance to align 3 key components. One is industry, the people that make it happen, the companies that know how to do it, make it happen, encourage new entrants to come into this battery supply chain, for example. Industry, money, the European Bank was involved in this. And the third thing is the policymakers. So lining government, money, and industry, it sounds an obvious thing. It's very difficult to do. And I think that is where success has happened with the European Union. They put 3 billion euros into building the supply chain, not battery capacity, but anything upstream of that. Of course, 3 billion euros is not a lot of money, but it's a decent chunk to get stuff started and rolling. That was a good move, I think, because then they're saying, we don't just want to make batteries, we want to make this this entire supply chain. And so I think the US can certainly learn lessons from that. I'm not sure, I forgot what your second point was, Dan, but I think that building this having a lithium ion economic task force for the USA, I think would be a great start.
Fantastic. I think one follow-up, and I see here an audience question that's come in, is, what are Benchmark's analyses of other minerals other than lithium? Lithium gets a lot of attention, but it's really just one piece of the puzzle. Are there other vulnerabilities that tend to stand out?
Yeah, I think they all share similar vulnerabilities. Lithium, cobalt, we talked about earlier. I think that when you look at these critical minerals, if there's one country that mines 50% of your supply or more, then that's a red flag. That is more investments needed around the world to spread that geopolitical risk. If there's the opportunity to do it within your own country, then it makes sense. But the problem with mining domestically in the USA is the customers aren't based there yet. You need those chemical plants, you need the battery plants, you need the cathode anode plants. So that's why the midstream is so important, to actually create an industry for these raw materials to go into. So I think they all share similar vulnerabilities. Geologically, no shortage. The problem is investment in the ground to build the mines, to build the chemical plants, to get it into the supply chain. So the next 10 years will be volatile, quite frankly, but there are no long-term blockers to this. It's just action now from industry, investment, and government to actually get this infrastructure built.
Great. I think we have time for one more question, and I'll see if I can wrap a couple of these together, maybe under the umbrella of really technology. One, is there work going on in the area of developing, I lost it here, hold on, synthetic mineral materials that don't need to be mined? And sort of a similar question, what mineral might reduce the weight and inflammatory risk, the fire risk associated with lithium? And if I could just sort of put it together, just say, in terms of the work on technology substitutes, recycling alternatives, what do you see as potentially promising in garnering the most investment in private sector interest?
Quickly on the risk of fire, inflammatory risk. That's what Cobalt does. Cobalt is a great stabilizer to ensure that the safety levels are increased. So you can't just take Cobalt out of a lithium-ion battery and it be a safe battery. So that highlights the importance of Cobalt there. But in terms of Dan, what was the second point? Sorry.
The other one is there synthetic materials that maybe could reduce the need for mining?
Yeah, everything is mined. Everything comes from the ground or is grown. It's a great phrase I love. And even synthetic materials have inputs that are mined. For example, synthetic graphite, for example, is actually petroleum coke feedstock from the petroleum industry. So you can see how everything has to be infrastructure has to be built. The USA, like the European Union and China, are building a heavy industry from scratch. When was the last time this happened? Not in our lifetimes, right? This will be FDR stuff, just before or after the war. But the key thing for me is the building heavy industry from scratch. But the whole supply chain can be built in its entirety and at the same time, rather than cobbling together different suppliers from around the world. I think that is a great advantage, but it will take a decade to do so, and a holistic approach is needed to ensure, as I mentioned, aligning industry, government, and money.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. And that is all the time we have for today. I'm going to turn it over to Marty Durbin for closing remarks. Thank you very much, Simon.
Thanks, Dan.
Well, let me just thank all of our viewers for joining us today. That was a really great conversation, and thanks to all of our speakers and our moderators today, Christopher and Dan, great job. Again, I want to thank our sponsor, Siemens Energy. So please plan to join us for our next session on July 15th as we explore the opportunity for nuclear energy to be a cornerstone of a cleaner energy future. You can find the registration link in the chat box. So again, thank you all for being with us.